Am I dead? No, I'm just pale. There's a stark difference between my face and my hands. I'm well aware. I'm in between fake tan days, okay? Happens to the best of us. Hey guys, welcome back for episode 14 of Killer Weekend. My name's Megan if you're new here, and if not, thank you for joining us again. Each week we'll discuss a true crime case, and you guys can feel free to leave your thoughts in the comments box below. I would normally do that with my hands if you're new here, but as you can tell, there's been a problem. If you like all things creepy and spooky, please hit that subscribe button. I'll be here for you every Wednesday and Friday. Every Wednesday we'll be here with our Weirdo Wednesdays, where we'll discuss the UFOs, the supernatural, conspiracy theories, and all things in between. And every Friday we'll be here to discuss a true crime case. Also follow me on my Instagram page at MeganTrueCrime and over on TikTok at Megan.TrueCrime. How's your week been? If you guys do actually follow me on Instagram, you will know mine has been brutal. Yes, I had a 2-day migraine. A 2-day migraine, which then leaves you with a 2-day bruising. So I'm currently filming in front of very bright lights, and if I go blind halfway through, then it's been worth it for you guys. And I know what you're thinking. She had a migraine 2 days ago? Isn't she wearing a headband? And yes, I am wearing a headband, and I know it's probably going to give me another migraine, but I don't care, because fashion and bad roots as well. I really need my hair dyed, but mainly fashion. Oh. On the bright side of life, I have my new personal page coming, which it will be around next week, and keep your eyes peeled on my Instagram. I'll be announcing the exact date of my first vlog, which will be wedding, spooky wedding related. I'm going to have kind of romantic, gothic, alternative wedding. So if you're interested in all of that goodness, then please do hit that subscribe button. I will have the page up and ready for you guys very soon. Also, if you just enjoy watching a girl eat cheeseburgers in her car and walk through graveyards alone for no reason, then follow me too. So let's get into this week's case, and for this one I'm going to take you back a bit. Let's journey back to 2015, a time where R&B is still very popular, and also contour is not quite a thing. The only girls who have really good makeup work for a makeup counter, and yeah, just going out and clubbing is way better than staying in and watching Netflix till you're fat. I miss it. I miss the nightclubs, I'm not gonna lie. A little bit of ASMR for you then. You're welcome. But yeah, at that point in time in 2015, it was a nice warm April evening, and a young girl named Megan and her best friend Sam, hey Sam, if you're out there, I miss you, decided to go to one of the newer clubs in Glasgow named Sanctuary, which was located in Glasgow's posher West End area. Yes, Glasgow does have nice bits. I know, shocking. So there we were, having a good time, dancing, when we slowly realised that every man that was in Sanctuary was at least 45 years old, and they were all leading over all of the young girls in the club. It was a creepy sugar daddy place, I'm not gonna lie. I've been twice, and each time it's had the same vibe. So maybe I was just really unlucky, but yeah, it wasn't the place to be, Sanctuary NightClub, and it never really got that popular. I mean, maybe if you're a West End person, but really, I like somewhere a wee bit scummier than that, because then the young people go to the scummy places because they can't afford the drinks elsewhere. So we decided to ditch Sanctuary NightClub and head back to Samantha's for a nice kebab. But little did we know that only 1 week later an evil predator would be stalking Sanctuary NightClub looking for his next victim. This week, guys, we'll be discussing the case of the brutal murder of Karen Buckley. Karen Buckley was born in Mornabbey in County Cork in 1991 in a small farming area. Her mum and dad actually did own a farm where Karen grew up. Karen was the first girl in her family. She had 3 older brothers, Damien, Kieran and Brendan, and even though she was the only girl and, yep, life must have been a wee bit rough for her. She loved her brothers dearly and she always used to kind of tag along with them. Karen's mum and dad, John and Marion, were said to be absolutely delighted when they knew that she was going to be a girl. They were over the moon. This is something that Marion had always wanted, someone to share makeup tips with, have a nice time with, and someone to hang out with apart from a bunch of smelly dudes. No offence boys, I swear I love you. Karen's mum described her as a loving and caring little girl, and she definitely took that into her older years. Karen would spend quite a lot of time with her family. It meant a lot to her. She would spend a lot of time at the Clyde Rovers hurling and football club with her brothers, where they would play games and enjoy themselves, and it was one of those places, it was kind of like almost like a kind of golf club where the parents could go have a couple of shandies and the kids could go and play out on the field. It had a massive field area, so nobody really worried and everyone could just relax, as in that area everyone knew everyone and Karen and her family felt totally safe. County Cork was, like I said, a really small, tight-knit area where everyone knew everyone. It was also a beautifully scenic area with a lot of old ruins and old kind of cathedrals and kirks. It was really interesting and Karen did love her hometown, but after leaving school she got that old travelling bug, as many people do, and she wanted to go somewhere a little bit more exotic. She decided that she wanted to go to Thailand with her friends and then on to South America. But after she did, this kinda wasn't enough for Karen, but she wanted to go and be responsible, so she attended Limerick University and studied for 4 years to be a nurse. And after this, she thought this was her time to get out and get a change of scenery, and she made a massive jump to a hospital in Essex because she was from this really small town and she was then going to somewhere, obviously Essex isn't a massive place, but it's a lot busier than her small town in Cork. When she moved to Essex in England, she had a placement at the Princess Alexandra Hospital and she was said to love her job there and love all of the patients. However, she had a little bit of a niche practice that she really focused on. She wanted to help people get back on their way and help them get back to who they were before they had these horrible accidents or before they suffered really bad injuries or illnesses. She really loved watching people have their occupational therapy and that journey that they went on with their carers and with their practitioners. This was something that she wanted to do and she wanted to get into the field of occupational therapy. However, because it's a really niche field, she would actually have to go to university to study a master's degree so that she could be qualified within this one sector. And Karen took no time thinking about it. She knew this was what she wanted to do and she applied for Glasgow Caledonia University, which offered a great course. This university is known to Glasgow locals as Cali Uni, and it's a prestigious university. Glasgow's great, it's an amazing uni city. You've got Strathclyde, you've got Glasgow University, and obviously you've got many other great unis and colleges at your fingertips. Karen began her degree in January 2015 at Cali Uni, and with this she needed to move away from her family and friends, which was really hard for her, but she promised to keep in touch and let them know when she was home from nights out, and that she would let her mum know that she was always safe when she arrived back at her flat. This flat was actually located close to Cowcaddon subway, which is a 5-minute journey into Glasgow city centre. It's literally like an 8-minute walk away from Cineworld Cinema on Renfrew Street, which is a massive, I think it's like 8-storey building. It's like one of the tallest Cineworlds in the world. Not only that, you're just a short walk away from several bars and from the King's Theatre in Glasgow. There's so much to do around this area, so she was really right in the hustle and bustle of Glasgow city centre. Karen's flatmates were actually 2 other girls who hadn't been raised in Glasgow either. They'd moved to study in Glasgow, so she felt like this was really good because they were all in the same boat, learning about the city and learning where was good to go, where was good to eat and where was not good to eat. But they were enjoying themselves learning about it, and that's what it's all about when you move to a new city. You go to some places and they're minging, and you go to some places and they're the best meal you've ever had. So Karen and her friends decided that one night in April they wanted to venture out to somewhere in Glasgow's West End. So there's different kind of parts of Glasgow city centre, and one area is known as the West End of Glasgow, which is your more kind of bougie, upper class kind of area. There's not as much choice for bars and nightclubs there, but it's known to be a little bit posh, a little bit more highbrow, whereas Glasgow city centre is a little bit more laid back and a little bit more chilled, and you get a lot more kind of different variation of people going into the city centre just because it's bigger in general as well. On the night of the 11th of April 2015, Karen and her friends decided that they want to explore the West End, and they saw that this newish nightclub had been opened and they wanted to see what the hype was about. This nightclub was Sanctuary NightClub. It was an all kind of charcoal and black building. It looks really daunting from outside. I swear it's not like that inside. It's quite bright and airy and there's a lot of lights. It is just your typical club in Glasgow, if I'm honest. It was somewhere new and somewhere they hadn't been before. The girls decided to have some pre-drinks in their flat beforehand, you know, save money as a student. Everyone did it. And you would have as much shots as you possibly could so that you were a wee bit tipsy for your taxi there and you didn't have to buy as many drinks. Like, me and my friends were actually talking about this. We used to go out on nights out with literally like £20 and we'd come home with change. And a Greg's sausage roll. How could we afford it? I don't know. Probably boys buying us drinks, which isn't the safest, but hey ho, we were young. Amongst the pre-drinks, the girls start snapping photos of each other for social media, because if it doesn't happen on the gram, it didn't happen. And Karen was wearing this amazing black jumpsuit and a pair of red heels. She paired this up with a nice red lippy and a black faux kind of leather jacket and a nice black handbag. She was ready to go. The girls were absolutely buzzing to get out on the town, and when they left and entered Sanctuary NightClub, they sadly had no clue that not all of the girls would be returning home safely that night. At around 1 a.m. that night, a tipsy, not drunk, her friend said she hadn't had enough to be properly drunk. Karen was seen on the CCTV in Sanctuary NightClub quite sober as well. She didn't really seem that drunk and she was chatting to people as she went quite coherently. Karen then went to the toilet and she had left her jacket with her friends, but she'd managed to take her handbag with like her phone, her house keys and everything that she needed, her money, etc. with her. Her friends were expecting her to come back within like 5-10 minutes, and when she didn't arrive, it was a wee bit weird, but it didn't raise major red flags. They just assumed that possibly Karen had gone home, she maybe wasn't feeling well, and that they would find her when they got back to the flat later that night. Karen had actually left the nightclub at this point, and around 1:10 a.m. had actually went outside of the nightclub where she ran into a 21-year-old man who she started chatting to. His name was Alexander Pacteau. Alexander Pacteau was the 21-year-old eldest son of French entrepreneur Guillaume Pacteau. So sorry if I'm not saying your name right, but you know, Google's not my friend. I tried, okay? If you're French, please don't at me. And his Scottish mother, who was Noreen Dow. The family were very well off. They lived in an affluent area of Glasgow named Bear's Den, where the family owned their own courier business, which had taken off. His mum and dad had provided a very cushy life for them. The houses around Bear's Den in the area that Alexander lived were about £1 million to buy, and that's kind of like the starting off prices. So yeah, Bear's Den's known as being pretty fancy, like a wee bit posh. As a young child, Alexander attended Baljaffrey Primary School near his home, and it was said that he was quite an odd child. Even his father's work colleagues said that he was always an odd boy and just a really bad wee boy. That's an actual quote from one of them. He said that whenever they would have dinners or go out for dinner, he was fascinated with having everyone's attention, and even if his mother Noreen's attention was taken off of him for 2 seconds, he would have an absolute fit, he would throw a major flaky, and he would throw his plate, throw his food around, and this is when he was about 5 or 6, so he definitely knew better at this time. It was said that he could not handle any of the attention not being on him. Not only this, a few friends said that they had never met such an obnoxious wee boy, which as a child, it must have been pretty bad for people to say stuff like that. It was said that his parents were constantly yelling at him, constantly trying to correct this behaviour, and really nothing seemed to do the trick because he was just an absolute nightmare. Several family friends even said that they worried about what he would turn out like with this existing behavioural problem that was clearly going untreated. In order to shape Pacteau's future, his mum and dad invested in a very prestigious private school called Kelvinside Academy, which is about £11,000 a year to send your kids there. So yeah, pretty pricey. They wanted their eldest son to have the best start in life, and they were hoping that this would kind of spark some entrepreneurial spirit and that he would excel in his academics. But sadly, this was not the case. Alexander was a bit of a weirdo, a bit of a lone wolf, and even though he had a couple of friends, everyone said he was a pathological liar and would make up weird stories. He was also seen as being a bit socially awkward and didn't quite know how to hold a normal conversation and would often overshare, like majorly overshare personal things about himself, which he does later on, but we'll chat about that too. The hopes they had for his studies as well didn't really pan out. He left in 5th year, and in Scotland, when you go to high school, you start in 1st year and you leave in 6th year with your full set of grades. So he actually left a year early, and he only left with subpar grades. He didn't really do that well in school. I think they were hoping that this would outshine some sort of intelligence within him in this school, but we all know that going to a private school does not make you a clever cookie. I mean, I know people who went to my school, which was just a normal kind of run-of-the-mill public school, council school, and they're doctors and everything and surgeons and all that stuff now. And then I know other people who went to private schools and they literally work in fast food. So yeah, doesn't really make a difference clearly. And sadly, Alexander was no exception. He was always said to be quite an entitled young boy, and he decided that once he had left school at the age of 17, he was going to open up his own courier service, much like his father. And sadly, this business did not take off, and in their second year they only made a turnaround of £3,000, which was not enough to cover all of their overheads. Also, at the age of 17, things started going a little bit pear-shaped for Alex. His parents' relationship sadly began to crumble, and the two actually filed for separation. Not only this, his father's business took a massive nosedive, and he actually had to file for bankruptcy, leaving the family no choice but to move out of their £1 million home and into separate flats. Alexander had the option to live with his mother or his father, but since his mother had gained custody of their other children, he decided to move in with his mother in Dryman near Loch Lomond. This was a far cry from Alexander's beautiful fairy tale childhood that he was used to, and it was said that he was constantly berating his mother for the way that their lives had turned out. He chose to move out because of the constant arguments and the fact that he was constantly getting kicked down and out of the house, and he chose to move to an area named Drumchapel, which at the time wasn't the best area in Glasgow. It's a far cry from where he was raised in Bearsden. Not only this, Alexander's life of crime started to pick up a little bit of memento at this time. He was actually accused of attempted rape on a young woman one night in Glasgow city centre. He was at a 21st birthday party, and this is when he was only 17, and he was walking along and realised that he would struggle to get a taxi. Glasgow was notorious for it to be hard to get taxis, and he decided he was going to walk to a taxi rank nearby. He might have a better chance if he's waiting in the taxi rank queue. So he's walking along, and he actually sees this young girl also walking in the same direction as him, and a few guys are kind of catcalling her, kind of whistling at her and shouting at her, and she just looks a wee bit frazzled. He decides to then be a hero as he is, and approaches the girl to walk her to the taxi rank and says that if she feels comfortable, he can share a taxi. They're going to the same area, and it means that she doesn't need to get in the back of this unknown taxi with a stranger, and she's a wee bit safer if he's in the car with her. She does agree. He kind of manipulates her into believing that he's a really good guy, and whilst they're walking along to the taxi rank, he allegedly grabs the young girl and throws her down a lane onto the ground. While she's on the ground, he then tries to perform a sex act on her, and when she manages to kind of fight him off, he then tries to get her to perform a sex act on him, and he tries to take off his trousers and his belt. The girl screams and screams until someone hears her call, and two young men who actually lived in the flat above the lane came down to her rescue and managed to stop this from happening. They said that they saw Alexander buttoning up his trousers and refastening his belt, and he said that nothing happened. They had had a fight and she had fell down. Really? Okay. It gets worse, I'm just warning you, it gets so much worse. The two guys then frighten him away, and the girl phones police. The police do apprehend Alexander later that night, and he's arrested on the charge of attempted rape. However, only a few weeks later, Alexander is actually in a dangerous car wreck, and he ends up in an induced coma and has to learn how to walk again over a period of 6 months' time. I mean, I'm just going to say what we're all thinking, because by the end of this you'll probably be thinking it too. Head injury? Am I right? They've all got bloody head injuries. What's happening? Google it, it's actually a thing. This does postpone the trial to 2013, and at this time Alexander baffles the court with what comes out of his mouth. He claims whilst in court in a Paisley courthouse that he could not have sexually assaulted this young woman, or tried to, because he is a homosexual male. And the reason he was buttoning up his trousers and putting his belt back on when the men saw him in the alleyway is actually because she slapped him in the alleyway when they were walking to the taxi rank, even though that's completely wrong direction, but okay. And he fell, and his belt buckle fell off and his trousers fell down. Yes, because that's what happens, you know. I don't know how many times I've fell and my belts just flew off and my jeans have just flew off and everything's just flew off. And the jury believed him and he was acquitted. Like, who was on that jury? Other rapists? So yeah, it seems like he's gotten away scot-free, and his victim is understandably devastated. But we'll come back to that. He then doesn't stop there. After his car crash, he decides that he no longer is able to work because of his injuries, and that's completely understandable. He was experiencing massive side effects from his injuries in the car, but he started claiming disability benefits. That's totally fine. But what wasn't fine was the fact he was then forging banknotes in Great British pounds up to the value of £6,000. So he was claiming his benefits, meanwhile making a little bit of his own money on the side. He had a printer and everything set up in his West End flat, which he'd recently moved to after he said that his other flat in Drumchapel was infested with cockroaches. The only cockroach in that flat, Alexander, was you. But during this time, he's also lying to his mum and dad. They have no clue this is all going on, which I find a wee bit hard to believe, because the banknote forgery thing was in the paper and everything, as was the sexual assault, and he was named and shamed in those. So did they just not know? Did no one say, hey, I think your son's in a little bit of trouble? I think that's kind of like a recurring theme in this, and I don't like to judge. We know we don't like to judge. It's not good to judge. But he was only 17 when all this was going on. Like, he'd been in a massive car accident and was learning to walk again. Where were his parents? Like, where was his mum and dad? It was said that he actually tried to move in with his dad a wee bit after his mum and him had that argument, and he moved to Drumchapel, but his dad actually had a new girlfriend at the time, and he was said to be really disrespectful to her and really hateful towards her. possibly because he had a natural hatred towards women anyway, who knows, but they really butted heads, and that's why he was asked to leave his dad in his new stepmother's house. But I mean, I know obviously, but you created this person. Like, you made him the way he is because of you, or nature, whatever you believe. For the forgery of the notes and the bank notes, he was actually sentenced to community service, which was an extremely light sentence. And you need to kind of wonder whether it's if his family had connections or something like that. And he was let go with basically just a slap on the wrist. After this, Alexander saw a picture of himself in the newspaper coming out of the trial, and he looked quite overweight. He'd put on quite a lot of weight. Because he was said to be quite vain, he then decided, even though he could not afford it, couldn't even afford his beans on toast, he decided to get a personal trainer, and he helped him lose over 4 stone. So he was feeling himself, he was feeling a bit better about himself, and in 2014 he managed to get a flat nearer Glasgow city centre, and he moved in there with another friend because he could not afford to live there by himself. Don't even think he could afford to live there with a friend. But anyway, he decides to move into this flat on Dorchester Avenue, and eventually in 2015 he is out on the party scene again and enjoying himself. But everyone said that after his car accident he was just quite not right. The lying to his parents and things like that is not a new thing for Alexander, or so his friends say. His friends say that he is a fantasist who lies about everything. He's always done this. But there's other things that he's oddly honest about. Well, Alexander starts to tell people at a local garden centre in Kirkintilloch that he worked at for a short period of time. Very briefly, he would work there on and off if he ever needed a bit of extra money, and he would often tell the girls there, making them majorly uncomfortable, that he would use prostitutes frequently, like a lot. And you know, if you wanna, you do what you do, but it's just a bit bizarre that he actually would tell other women about this and brag about it, almost as if it was something to be super proud of. His friends said that he was so unable to have a human connection that this was the only way he could really get a girl to be interested in him. On the 11th of April 2015, Alexander decided to go out for a meal with his mother, his grandmother, his stepfather and his younger brother. They all went out for a meal, and Alexander excused himself because he was heading out for a night out in Sanctuary NightClub. When he got to his flat, all of his mates were there and they were all having pre-drinks, much like that of Karen Buckley's friends earlier that night. And whilst they were all drinking and enjoying themselves, they realised that to get a taxi to Sanctuary NightClub from the flat, they would actually have to get 2 cars because there was too many of them. So they decided to phone 2 separate taxis, and the first taxi came, picked up the boys, and the other boys were waiting on this second taxi. Now, anyone who lives in Glasgow, just because you book a taxi at the same time doesn't mean they're gonna come anytime soon. Honestly, you used to genuinely book 2 taxis at around, say, like 9, half 9 at night, and one would arrive at 9:35 and the other one wouldn't arrive until about 12. So Alexander was well aware of this himself, and he thought, can't really be bothered waiting on another taxi. And even though he had been drinking a little bit that night, he then was adamant he was going to take his car to Sanctuary NightClub and drive the other boys in. A lot of them were like, no, just wait in a taxi. Okay then, let's drunk drive. So the boys head into town and he parks his car near Sanctuary NightClub around the corner. They head in, they're enjoying themselves, they start having drinks. Alexander steps outside, and this is where he comes into contact with 24-year-old nursing student Karen Buckley. Karen is seen on CCTV at the nightclub speaking to Alexander. It seems kind of friendly, kind of chatty, not romantic at all. There's no kissing, there's no holding hands, there's no hugging, there's no close contact, nothing at all. The two then walk off in the opposite direction of Karen's flat towards Alexander Pacteau's car. This is the last time Karen Buckley is ever seen on CCTV. The next day, in the early hours of the 12th of April, Karen's friends arrive home and they're a little bit drunk and they're shouting for Karen when they realise that she is not in the flat. She didn't come back that night. They do think that maybe she's gone back with someone or maybe she's gone to another friend's house, so they wait it out until the morning. And when Karen's still not arrived by midday the next day, they know something's wrong. This wasn't like Karen. She didn't just go back to random guys' houses, and she certainly didn't not text them back. They were all calling Karen and her phone had been switched off, so therefore they knew something was up. The girls decided to go straight to the police station, and when they explained her nature and what Karen was normally like, police agreed that this was completely out of character and they didn't think this was just a mistake and that she'd eventually turn up. Karen's family back in County Cork were called, and her mother, her father and two of her brothers, one who actually travelled all the way from Australia to come back, actually managed to come through to Glasgow in order to get the appeal done. One of our other brothers stayed home at the farm to keep things running. The police managed to get a press conference with the family and said that it would be good for them to get their feelings across, because an emotional plea would spark some sort of guilt, hopefully, if anyone was holding Karen or if she decided to run off on her own. During this time, police had also received the CCTV footage from outside Sanctuary NightClub where they had seen Karen speaking to Alexander Pacteau, and they had already received tips as to who this gentleman was. When they tracked him down, Alexander had a completely different story as to what actually happened between him and Karen Buckley. He said that yes, they had met outside Sanctuary NightClub and they had struck up a conversation and hit it off. He said then it was agreed that the two would go back to his flat where they had consensual sex, and during the sex she had managed to hit her head on the bed frame where she started to bleed a little bit, and because of this she decided that she wanted to go home around 4 a.m. He said she then left his flat and had every intention of walking home, which would have taken her like 30 minutes. So to let her do that while she was bleeding from her head, you're a lovely man. The police find it a wee bit shady that he would then volunteer this information, and find it a little bit strange that he's yet again oversharing like he does, and they do believe that this could possibly be to hide a reason for why Karen's blood may be in his flat. Because of this, they decide to then do a search on the flat, in which they do find more of Karen's blood than there should be, and also some blood in the drainage area of the bathtub. So this already not looking great for Alexander Pacteau. Not only this, a short while after the disappearance of Karen, her handbag is actually found in a park not too far from Alexander's home. They find her handbag in a bin in Dawes Home Park, which is literally a 16-minute walk across the road from Alexander's flat and only a 3-minute drive. In that bag, her phone was there, her money, her keys, her passport, her wallet, all of her cards were in there, and police knew that this was definitely foul play. It seemed like someone was trying to bury some evidence and trying to hide Karen's last whereabouts. Police know that Alexander Pacteau is their man. They know it, and when they find out about his previous rape allegation, they just know that this has to be their guy. Whilst police are investigating this case, many candlelit vigils were held around the Glasgow city area for Karen. So many people could not believe that this happened in our hometown, that this young girl had gone missing, and a lot of people hoped that she would turn up and she maybe just had ran away for a few days. Sadly, Karen's family knew this wasn't the case. She would never leave it this long without speaking to her mum and dad, and after they'd made their appeal on the news, Karen was such a caring and compassionate person. She would never have put her family through this kind of turmoil. Shortly after the handbag is found in Dawson Park, One of Alexander Pacteau's friends comes forward to police saying that if Alexander was going to hide a body, he has a rough idea as to where he would hide it. You see, Alexander, during the period that he wasn't working and he was claiming disabilities, was also selling fireworks and other illegal items. He had been hiding the fireworks in a storage unit in a farm just outside the city. He said that if there was going to be anywhere he would be able to hide it securely without police knowing where it was, then that's where it would be, as he had hidden illegal items from the police here before. Police rush out to the farmhouse and manage to break the padlocks on the door. What they find when they go inside is just rubbish, bits of paper, bicycles, things like that, just absolute crap. And then they see in the corner of the room there is a massive barrel. There's a few bits and pieces lying on top of it, and it doesn't seem like it's been there recently. It seems like it's been there for a while, but they decide to check the barrel, and when they open it, they make the grisly discovery of the 24-year-old pretty nursing student Karen Buckley soaking in some sort of acidic liquid. Karen's body has been quite badly decomposed, but probably not as much as it should have been had it been bathed in an acidic liquid. You see, the police test this and it turns out to be caustic soda, which is also known as sodium hydroxide. Because they know that this area was really only known to Alexander Pacteau, police then dig a little deeper into Alexander's whereabouts and can see that whilst he was being followed, he made a few unexpected stops in the days after Karen's disappearance. You see, he was caught on CCTV at several local shops to him buying sodium hydroxide. He also stopped into a pound stretcher, which is kind of like a dollar store in the States, or Poundland. Used to be one in England, I'm not sure if there is anymore, but it's basically where you can buy anything for £1. It's really, it's pretty great, I'm not gonna lie. I like a pound stretcher. Due to the overwhelming evidence against Alexander Pacteau, police then arrest him on the first-degree murder of Karen Buckley. He then pleads guilty in a court of law, and police have to kind of gather what they believe happened. Alexander has never really came forward and explained exactly what happened to Karen and why it went so wrong for her that night, but police believe that through some ruse, he managed to get Karen back to his car. And from someone who lives in Glasgow city centre, police said that they believed that she maybe had been offered a lift home from him, but I don't know if someone as street smart as Karen, who'd been travelling all over the world, would have accepted a lift home from a stranger in Glasgow city centre where she wasn't a local. Obviously, we can only speculate as to why Karen agreed to go with Pacteau that night, but it is also something to wonder that in the Glasgow nightclub scene, if you go to the toilet, it's where a lot of people choose to do drugs. And perhaps she went to the toilet because she left like 2 minutes after she went to the toilet, managed to meet him outside, leaving her jacket. Perhaps he said that he could get her drugs and that he had maybe provided drugs to another group of girls in the toilet that night, and this is what led Karen to walk to his car with him. Police then believe that Pacteau managed to either force Karen into the car, or if he was offering her a lift home, she got in the car willingly, but she actually was murdered only 20 minutes after getting into Pacteau's car. Police believe that he had pulled up on the side of a deserted road not far from the city centre. He then bludgeoned her with the wrench that was in his car and then attempted to strangle her when he did not think that she was dead yet. There was blood all over the car. Pacteau then drove back to his flat whilst his friends were still out partying, and her nursing friends had no clue that she was even gone yet. And he took her back to the flat. Karen never entered that flat alive, and police know that for sure. He took her upstairs, leaving his car there full of blood for all to see, parked outside his flat, and placed her in his bedroom where he slept next to Karen that entire night, feet away from her dead body. The next day, whilst his flatmate was at work, he then placed Karen in the bathtub and tried to dissolve her body with the caustic soda, sodium hydroxide, that he had bought earlier that day from several shops. When it didn't work as quickly as he wanted it to, like he'd seen on Breaking Bad apparently, he didn't realise that caustic soda is very temperamental to temperature, and it has to be at a certain temperature to have the desired acidic effects. So when this didn't work, he decided to cut an incision right through Karen's sternum and pour the liquid directly into her corpse. It still didn't really make much of a difference, and he then cleaned her off as he was running out of time before his flatmate came back from work, dumped her in his room, and yet again slept next to her dead body. Then, once he was able to get a hold of a large barrel, almost, he decided to then fill that with the liquid and then place Karen's body in it. Several of the residents within the close that he stayed in and the flats that he stayed in have said that they seen him struggling out to his car with this barrel with no knowledge that that poor girl was inside the whole time. He then drove out to the farm, left it there in the lockup that he used to hide his illegal fireworks and everything else, and then decided to place bits and pieces on top like rubbish just to make it look that the barrel had always been there. Sadly, after this, he then drove away and forgot all about Karen. Alexander Pacteau was then sentenced to a minimum of 23 years behind bars, which is equivalent to life in prison here in the UK. Karen's mum and dad were understandably devastated. It was a good sentence technically, but 23 years is not even the time that Karen had spent on this earth, and he will be a relatively young man when he's up for parole. He'll only be in his 40s. He can still go out and live his life. Karen can't. Her mother and father called Alexander a coward and said they were just pleased that he cannot go out and do this to another girl anytime soon, and they don't think he should ever get out of jail. And I hope to their last days they fight to keep that monster in jail where he belongs. It's said that he's actually had quite a hard time. Alexander was sent to the notorious Shotts prison, which is meant to be quite rough. It's one of those ones you always see on TikTok, and it's home to a lot of really bad people out there. But he was treated really badly because murderers of women and children do not do well in Scottish prisons, and it's been said that he's been trying to befriend some other rapists in order to gain a little bit of security in prison, but that's not worked out for him, and constantly he's been moved to solitary confinement just for his own protection. He was then moved to Barlinnie prison, and this is said to have not really worked out that well for him either, and yet again he is often in solitary confinement. His mother, Noreen, says that she is embarrassed and ashamed of what he's done, and that no amount of apologies can ever help the Buckley family and reverse what her son did to their daughter. It's just such a tragic thing. I know for a fact, obviously it's left a massive footprint on the people of Ireland. They've lost one of their own, but it's also affected the people of Scotland and definitely the people of Glasgow. I know for a fact that when this happened, everyone was in shock. Like I said, me and my friend were literally at Sanctuary NightClub the weekend before, and this was something that just didn't happen in Glasgow. It reminds me so much of the Moira Jones case that we talked about. It's just something that we don't ever really see happen here, like especially to females. I know there's a lot of stigma around Glasgow and drug violence, knife violence, things like that, but it's not all bad. And the one thing that I think a lot of people don't worry about is that their daughters are going to go missing from Glasgow, and it's just so tragic. 100% the Glaswegian people felt this when this happened to this young girl by one of our own, and it's just absolutely tragic that this happened to poor Karen Buckley. The sad irony of this crime was that, remember, Alexander himself had been in a massive car accident and had relied on an occupational therapist to get him back on his feet after 6 months of not being able to walk, and Karen Buckley could have just as easily been that person for someone else. Also, there has been speculation that the attempted rape that he got let away with back in 2011 is actually going to be retried if possible because of the double jeopardy law. There's not really much that can be done around this, but I heard that they're going to try and look into this and see if he can be tried again for that, because we all know that he's capable of it, more than capable, and the fact that he lied and said that he was gay and that was just taken on board, like, who was the jury in that case? Forever Glasgow will be stained by the memory of Alexander Pacteau, and we will be forever ashamed that he was raised in our city. Karen's family did return to Cork and tried to move on with their lives. Only a year after Alexander Pacteau was convicted, they welcomed their first grandson. So the family are doing their best to move on, but clearly they'll never forget the memory of their beautiful girl who just wanted to help people. I hope you've enjoyed this week's episode. I hope I was able to give you a wee bit of insider information being from the city itself. If you do have any questions about this case or about the Glasgow area that I've not touched on, please do let me know. And definitely after that happened, I know me and my friends never went to Sanctuary NightClub again. Not only that, it did get a wee bit notorious for creepy older men. To be fair, some of the clubs are kind of like that in Glasgow. Like, they are really, really good for like a short period of time, like a year, and then they go absolutely off the deep end. There was another nightclub in Glasgow who me and my friends used to go like every single week. It was so good. It was called Common, and another guy bought it over and put two-way mirrors in the bathrooms so that if girls were in the bathrooms, guys could pay a certain fee to sit in this room and watch girls coming in and out of the toilet cubicles and doing their makeup in this two-way mirror. Yeah, welcome to Glasgow. But yeah, I swear it's not all bad. If you're ever going to visit Scotland, it is a good place to be. The people are mental, but in a good way. Exhibit A. But anyway, I'll stop rambling. If you like this week's episode, please hit that subscribe button and don't miss me on Wednesdays, Fridays, and keep your eyes peeled for a wee announcement on my Instagram at Megan True Crime for my new personal vlog. And I also have my TikTok page, don't forget, at megan.truecrime. I'll see you all on Wednesday for our Weirdo Wednesday episode. So remember guys, lock your doors, don't talk to strangers, and definitely don't talk to big 6'4" quasi-model looking mother outside nightclubs, okay? Please don't. See ya!